Tell me if this sounds familiar. Your product has just come out with a great new feature and you're enjoying some benefits of it. Sales are up, customers are happy, but that only lasts for a while when the competition catches up and they launch their version of your great feature and a bunch of their own great features, forcing you to catch up, and around we go. Problem here is this isn't a cycle upwards, it's a cycle downwards. Everybody loses. One of the things I frequently see leading product managers and product marketers astray is competitive strategy. You'll hear it from all angles. Sales will be asking for competitive advantages over certain other vendors, the infamous battle card. You'll hear about a fancy new feature that one of the competitors has launched. You'll hear customers and prospects ask you why you don't have feature X when all of your competitors do. So let's talk about competitive strategy. What works, what doesn't work, and how to answer those tougher questions that you might be getting. Starting at the beginning, competitive strategy is about how you approach the market relative to your most significant competitors. By that I mean, how do you position, price, and ultimately how you sell your product. That will define the way you compete against your opposition. In a saturated and highly competitive space, it can be very difficult to eke out fertile ground and call it your own. As products and markets mature, the expectation rises within the market that certain features and capabilities will just simply be there. They become table stakes. Once enough of the products within the space have a feature, it just becomes baseline. This creates the most common scenario for product people, a feature war. By engaging in this process directly and fully, you are commoditizing your own software, and you lose. You are creating the situation where the buyer is going to see your product as largely interchangeable with the competition. You'll be measured on a feature checklist basis. Got it, got it, got it, need it, got it, need it, need it, got it, need it, and so on. And then you'll be given a score. In the event that you have the same score as your competitors, which is often the case in a mature market, the only thing left to compete on is price. And that is a very bad place to be. I'm sure you have lots of commodities that you will go and buy when you go to the grocery store, and you'll buy them when they're on sale because you aren't particularly attached to any specific brand, or you can't differentiate really the difference between two bottles of shampoo or two bars of soap. For consumer goods, this is to be expected. For software, it will threaten your business. Software makes a terrible commodity because it's expensive to build, expensive to maintain, and, for example, in the case of SaaS, it can be very expensive to keep running. Downward price pressure and margin erosion will put pressure on the entire business's revenue line, and growth stops and eventually reverses course. So, if we're not competing on features, what should we be competing on? Well, maybe it's UX. Definitely, having a clearly superior UX is an advantage you will want to use, but, and I do wish this weren't the case, UX has very minimal impact on buying decisions in business to business. In business to consumer, it's a much more powerful differentiator. The trouble is that in B2B, the buyer is typically very detached from the end users of the software. They are buying the software to solve larger numbers of bigger business problems. And if your competitors solve more problems than you do, you will likely lose, even if your UX is dramatically better for the feature set that you have. In large companies, the buyer may have never even seen or met the users who will be using the software day to day. So consider this. When was the last time you were asked for input on your HR system, timesheet system, expense claim system, and so on? Chances are pretty good you never got a vote. And chances are pretty good you don't love every piece of software you simply have to use. Now, that doesn't make UX useless in B2B, but it does make it harder to use as your sole discriminating difference between your software and someone else's. It's not enough to pull a buyer away from a price war unless you can boast that your user experience drives a notably higher productivity or efficiency rate than the competition. And that is possible to do, and many companies do, but it's pretty hard to really quantify. In business to consumer, the buyer and the user are typically the same person. And so the buyer will have a firsthand appreciation for the net benefit of your superior user experience. They will see a superior UX as a mark of quality, and they will generally be more inclined to pay for that. As such, it can be a very powerful competitive advantage, and it also creates a moat around your business. It's very hard for most companies to stop what they are doing and simply work at revamping the entire user experience for their software. If you've ever worked on a legacy product, you've probably had that conundrum. You want to go back and update the UX and modernize it, but you simply can't because the cost is very, very high, and taking a year to completely rewrite the user experience for your software, deliver the same product, probably slightly buggier, a year later loses you market momentum, and that's a tough thing for any business to swallow. So that means if you do have a user experience and are ahead, it's quite challenging for companies to catch up to you, and that can be an important competitive lever in the B2C world. So if UX is, let's call it variable in its usefulness as a competitive lever, what else can we use? Well, to answer this question, you need to look deeply at your company and figure out what is your company trying to do in the world, and what unique perspectives, skills, or approaches does the company bring to bear in solving those core problems. Ideally, your competitive strategy doubles down on who you are and what your business is, because there is no other business that's like you, and you can carve out a micro niche in a very competitive, very saturated space simply by thinking of the problem space and the customer base differently than your competition. The easy trap to fall into is to see what competitors are doing and feel you just need to meet their standard. It's a terrible idea for all the reasons you can imagine, because you're now following their strategy, not your own. They presumably have done their own homework and figured out that this feature is the next best thing that they can build for their product. If you blindly follow suit without having done your own homework, you run a very real risk of building a capability that is inferior to the competition's, simply because they built the feature on the back of who they are as a business, and you built it on the back of who they are as a business. For this, you'll want to talk to the CEO, the head of marketing, the head of product, if that's not you, of course, and really get an understanding of what your product and company are trying to become when they grow up. It is possible that those answers are unclear, and very commonly they are. If so, stay tuned, because I'm going to cover all of that in a separate video, as it's a huge topic all on its own. If, however, you walk away confident that you understand what the company's mission is and how the product is expected to help deliver on that mission, you have the basics of what you need right there. So next up, you'd need to identify the, say, 3 to 5 things that your product does that really reinforce the company and product visions, the things that are proof points that what your company and product are trying to become are embodied in the software that you're building. Those elements should become the cornerstone of your positioning. So why is that? Well, it's because it's going to be very difficult for your competitors to replicate unless they happen to have exactly the same mission and product vision you do, which would be pretty weird, wouldn't it? So now you have the elements required to answer some of those tough questions we mentioned at the beginning. When sales ask for a battle card, you lead with strength. Make sure that they are putting those 3 to 5 key positioning points forward first. Defer as long as you can doing the feature by feature comparison, because that's when you just wind up, in the buyer's mind, commoditizing your own software. If you concentrate on your company's distinctiveness, nobody can replicate it without rewiring their entire business to be like yours, and that's just simply not going to happen. Sure, knowing what features your competitors' products have and don't have is very useful to know, but if you actively compete on that basis, you will devalue your product. If you compete on the back of your company's areas of focus, you'll also be competing on its areas of excellence and innovation. And that can create a unique and powerful value proposition that nobody else can replicate. Now, if you got that far, you've actually done the hardest steps. From here, things get pretty easy. When you're looking at the roadmap, keep an eye out for the capabilities that most directly speak to that core value proposition. Those are the areas that you really want engineering and UX to pull out all the stops. Double down on those strengths. You will, from time to time, have to build features just because they've become table stakes, as I mentioned before. The market expects them. If they aren't core to what makes your product the strongest, this isn't the area to try to outcompete. Do it well, but recognize that the goal here is really to get a tick in the box, as you will not want to be competing on the back of the features where you aren't already leading. Your whole goal is to double down on strengths. If you've managed to do all of this, you have a very strong basis for your competitive strategy, and will very likely see the fruits of that labor very quickly. However, there are some more advanced topics in competitive strategy that are going to be worth delving into in a future video. So let me know in the comments below if you'd like to see a video on how to compete as a new entrant into the market, or how to compete in a very mature or saturated market, or how to compete when you are up against the status quo, which is actually probably people's number one competitor, and so on. Each of these carries a nuance that will alter how you will want to position yourself. And there is probably a list of a dozen more topics like that that we could cover as well. Each is easily capable of filling up a video on its own, so let me know if you particularly want to see a video on any of those or any other topics related to competitive strategy. While I will make all of these videos eventually, I'd like to hear your priorities. And that is a wrap for this video. Thank you for watching, and if you found it valuable, please do consider helping the channel by hitting those subscribe and like buttons. Thanks again, and take care of yourself, and I will see you in the next one.